Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of WrestleMania 31, or whatever they're calling it these days. I really did not like how they removed the number from the title. For me, the importance of WrestleMania lies within its long and prestigious history. Uh, and to replace the number with the play button, I think that's what it's supposed to be, uh, it just totally undermines that concept. And now WrestleMania just feels like another pay per view, even though it's supposed to be the pay per view. So I presume there is a reason behind this decision. Maybe they felt that they were modernizing it, and or that more casual fans might be willing to jump on board if they, because they might think that this is the 30th sequel to the original and they have to like watch all the events to understand the newest one. I don't know, but I really don't like it. And going into this WrestleMania, I was interested but not really excited because on one hand, there were a lot of unusual matchups. Matches that you probably won't see very often and maybe have never seen before. Uh, on the other hand, though, the story writing was absolute shit for most of these. The booking was sometimes very questionable, and I just thought the shows, the Raws and SmackDowns between Fastlane and WrestleMania were mostly very subpar, if not outright crappy. Uh, the one good show that I can recall was the episode where Sting saved Randy Orton at the end. And even that had some issues, and I'll go into what I feel about each and every individual storyline as I talk about these various feuds. So let me go ahead and bring up Wikipedia. Okay, so the first match was the Tag Team Championship. Tyson Kidd and Cesaro versus The New Day versus Los Matadores versus the Usos. Of all the storylines, I thought this was the shittiest because I couldn't really tell what the storyline was supposed to be. However, I have made a very distressing observation. Since I moved into this new apartment, I haven't gotten DirecTV or Cox or whatever available cable company is around, and I've just been using Hulu, and I've been using that to watch Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. Well, and I suspected this already, but Hulu does cut out some of the matches. In the case of this previous Raw on Monday, they cut out almost all the new NXT arrivals, and I think Sting's speech was removed. So I had to go on YouTube and find out what exactly happened there. Maybe that was what happened with this storyline. What little I saw before I moved, though, was pretty non-existent. Usually when the writing team can't think of a way to make these feuds interesting, they just throw in a lot more people and hope that that is enough to, engage the audience. In regards to all these teams, Tyson Kidd and Cesaro is the only one that interests me. I think they have a real interesting dynamic. They have good personalities. They're great in-ring workers. I was sort of against them winning the titles just because it felt like they were portrayed as credible filler instead of legit contenders. But now I'm totally for it. I think they deserve the belts. And I think, Natalia adds an interesting dynamic, the quasi-abusive relationship between her and Tyson Kidd. I'm interested where that's going to go, but unfortunately that seemed to take a back seat because there's so many other teams that are kind of also trying to get, part of the spotlight as well. The Usos, phenomenal workers, but I can care less about them because I've been overexposed to them. They've more or less carried the entire tag team division throughout the entire year of 2014. And yet the writers have absolutely no idea how to use them. The one feud I could say that they actually sort of developed as characters is was against the Miz and Mizdow, and unfortunately in that case I wanted to see more of the storyline between Miz and Mizdow. So like even now I feel like they're just there in order to lend credibility to this match because nobody gives a shit about the New Day and nobody gives a shit about Los Matadores. Los Matadores, in my opinion, just that gimmick needs to die. It's obnoxious. I'd say split them up, but have one retain the gimmick and tag team with El Torito. So because El Torito's the only one who gets any kind of reaction. Now he could be a more active wrestler, and that would be at least an intriguing dynamic. So I wouldn't feel the need to fast forward whenever I see them get in the ring. And then the other one could have a new gimmick, but as it is, I just don't care. Saying Ole over and over again is not going to get me any more interested. Plus, they're blatant jobbers. They had no chance of winning this. The New Day, I like everybody involved, but it's just a failed gimmick. The only way they could really salvage it is if they turn heel, in my opinion, or break up. But unfortunately, if they break up, I think they just get buried because at least right now there aren't enough tag teams, so they are getting some screen time. Whereas if they go into singles competition, I just don't think they'd appear on TV very often. I predicted Tyson Kidd and Cesaro would win, and they did. And they should have. But otherwise, like this was a good match. It was about as chaotic as I thought it would be. They get El Torito, Natalya, and Naomi involved. One of the Usos was taken out pretty early. I had heard that he had been injured at some point, so that wasn't a surprise. But they could have developed a good story around this where one Uso's kind of defying all the odds, even if he loses, but I never felt the announcers played that up. Otherwise, it was just all action, but no substance behind the action. But still, the action was pretty good. Very fast-paced, lots of cool spots. But, otherwise, it was a very unengaging match. But it was also a very unengaging feud, so what can you do? I would have much rather have seen Tyson Kidd and Cesaro feud with the primetime players. That would have been kind of new, or it would have been even cooler if they could somehow get the Ascension in here. I think the Ascension should have been in here instead of Los Matadores, so then you could at least have 2 heel teams and 2 face teams. Maybe that's what's going to be for the next pay-per-view, since they had a 8 versus 8 match on Raw where the Ascension was with Cesaro and Kidd, and they teased some tensions between both teams. So we'll just have to see. The Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale. Big Show won. I love the Big Show. I think he is the most underappreciated performer in all the roster, but he shouldn't have won this. So we finally got the split between Damien Mizdow and The Miz, and yet it felt so unimportant the way it went down. So you have all these people in the ring. Poor Curtis Axel, he gets eliminated first, and I knew that was coming. I'm sure everybody saw that coming, and it was kind of funny. Then they start fighting, and all the mid-carders get taken out. The irrelevant people. I think the Ascension took out Mark Henry, so that gives me hope that WWE still has some faith in them. Although, how relevant is Mark Henry these days? I guess he's sort of relevant because they gave him somewhat of a program with Roman Reigns. Ryback, he looks pretty strong. Unlike the Royal Rumble, he actually was able to stand out in this Battle Royale. But then he gets taken out. The New Day almost look like they're going to throw out the Big Show, which would have really surprised me. But Big Show held on, and that was admittedly pretty cool because you don't see a big guy usually show that much upper body strength and athleticism particularly when their own weight is working against them. So I did like that spot, and I liked how they kept trying to knock him over, and he's just holding on, and then Big Show just takes them all out. I thought that was pretty awesome. Tyson Kidd, to the credit of this battle royale, or not Tyson Kidd, Cesaro, he I kind of have faith that maybe WWE hasn't given up on him either as a singles competitor, because he took out Kane, in the same way he took out Big Show last year. Now, this seems like it should be very unimpressive considering everybody defeats Kane, but everybody relevant defeats Kane. If they saw him as a lower mid-card performer, I don't think he would have taken out Kane, because for some reason they like forcing Kane into the main event scene and telling us how dangerous he is when he's really not. But I did like that. And then I liked when he tried to do it on the Big Show again, but this time Big Show blocked it and took him out. They really did make Big Show look strong. And I thought Big Show did a great job in this match. It was just that this should have been a star-making moment. Mizdow should have won. They should have had Miz and Mizdow team up on the Big Show, and then Mizdow does something to eliminate the Big Show. The Miz takes credit for himself, and he's telling Mizdow to get out of the ring, and then Mizdow says, "To hell with that," and then throws Miz out. That should have been how this played out. Now, would it have mattered in the long run? Probably not, because this Memorial Battle Royale means absolutely nothing. Just look at what happened with Cesaro last year. It seemed like that was going to be the start of many big things, and then he almost immediately was demoted to jobber. So the same thing likely would happen with Mizdow anyway, but this should have been his moment. The Andre the Giant Battle Royale should be about whoever is the hottest performer at that time, and Cesaro was white hot during WrestleMania season, so it made sense for him to win, and Mizdow is getting very similar reactions, so this should have been his moment, and unfortunately he takes out the Miz first like a total idiot. Tries fighting the Big Show, put up a valiant effort. I thought Mizdow actually did a really good job at selling his babyface persona, but then Big Show still won. And how will he benefit from that? I don't know. Maybe WWE has some major plans involving Big Show these next few months. I'm not seeing them. The following Raw, they just had him team up with Kane and Seth Rollins against Orton, Reigns, and Ryback, I think it was. So does this imply that there's going to be some sort of storyline with Ryback? Because they aren't doing a whole lot with Ryback either. I have no idea, but why Big Show would need this win in order to add credibility to his strength, his abilities, when entering this program, I don't know, because it's not like Ryback has had any meaningful wins lately either. So that just seemed like a dumb idea, but in a way that sort of represents the issue I have with this WrestleMania. Great matches, or at least entertaining matches. I shouldn't say great. There is not a single match on this card that really bugged or bored me, but I felt like the recurring theme was that the older people were better than these younger people. They should have used this WrestleMania to break out many different stars. And you might think Seth Rollins really benefited from this, but I disagree. But instead, it was just the established vet goes over the new guy. So that really disappointed me. But we'll talk about each and every case as they come along. Then came the Intercontinental Championship ladder match between Daniel Bryan, Bad News Barrett, R-Truth, Dean Ambrose, Luke Harper, Dolph Ziggler, and Stardust. I have to admit, this angle actually entertained me. See, it began with the Ambrose versus Bad News Barrett feud, and I didn't like that. I thought it was pretty boring. I didn't think either man really could afford a loss, so the booking really sucked. But when they started having Ambrose just steal the belt, and then everybody else started stealing the belt, and Bad News Barrett would get all frustrated and pissed off, I will admit it did start to entertain me. Even though I really did not like how it seemed built more around Daniel Bryan versus Dolph Ziggler than it was around the current champion. That really suggests that WWE isn't all that interested in Bad News Barrett, which is a shame because I find him to be significantly more interesting and entertaining than Dolph Ziggler. Uh, like even R-Truth felt more relevant to the storyline than Barrett did. Uh, so in regards to all these people, by the way, I thought Mizdow was going to win the Battle Royale from the beginning. I was wrong, obviously. A lot of people felt Ryback would, but since WWE wasn't really doing anything with Ryback, I figured he would not be the winner here. And this match, I thought Daniel Bryan would win, but I was hoping Bad News Barrett would win because that would be a good payoff. Everybody stealing the belt and humiliating Barrett, who's been on a losing streak. I don't think he won any matches between Fastlane and WrestleMania. And I'm not even sure if he won any match. Well, I think he did because he beat Sin Cara. But then he also lost Sin Cara. So it seems like Barrett's weaker than he ever was before. But if Barrett actually overcame these odds, then I could, accept all of his past losses. He is a legitimate champion. But I figured Daniel Bryan was probably going to be the one to come out on top so he could have his consolation prize since he's obviously not going to be on the main event scene. And I understand why. There isn't a whole lot of room for him. Plus, I think his health is really kind of unstable. Maybe I'm wrong. But it seemed like he came back prematurely. And I think WWE is really concerned of how much longevity he has. I haven't had that much water to drink because my gallons all froze in the refrigerator for some reason, so if I start losing my voice, that is why. And I can't totally blame them because it seems like he's taken some really nasty bumps, and every time he does so, I'm really concerned that he's not going to get up. It looked like he got hurt by Luke Harper during one match. I remember that first match he had with Bray Wyatt when he came back. He jumped off the turnbuckle out on the outside, landed on Bray, but it seemed like he missed somewhat, so landed awkwardly. The crowd went dead silent. It was very awkward. And, maybe this will restore the Intercontinental Championship to, its prestige by him winning. But unfortunately, it's at the expense of poor Barrett. Ambrose sure faded into obscurity during this feud, considering he was the one who started it all. I would once again much rather him be more prominent than Dolph Ziggler. Luke Harper and Stardust were just padding. There was no chance they were going to win. They were just there for the sake of being there. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Dolph Ziggler, so I could care less that he's getting a push. But at least his in-ring work is generally fast-paced and entertaining. So the matches he's had with Daniel Bryan have been pretty good. Who else? Oh yeah, R-Truth. I think R-Truth can be entertaining, but he can also be really annoying. I'd much rather him become a heel and become like the crazy conspiracy theorist R-Truth. That would make his name actually make more sense. But this storyline gave him quite a bit to do on the commentary, and I thought it was sometimes pretty charming. The problem was that I never felt that he was strong enough to be a contender here. Like every time he'd actually get his hands dirty, he'd get his ass kicked. And he'd often not even fight back. Like he'd be confronted by Harper, who'd like do his crazy eyes, and then R-Truth I think like would meekly give him back the belt, and then Harper would kick his ass. So I was a little concerned that he might win this just because he was the underdog, the one who you would not expect to have a chance. But thankfully he did not. As for the match itself, it was an entertaining ladder match. It was what I expected. There are some really brutal bumps. When Barrett superplexed Stardust off the ladder, I was like, holy shit. When Harper powerbombed Ambrose out of the ring onto another ladder, I was like, holy shit. Very violent, very fast paced, very intense. Once again, the primary storyline was between Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler. I do not like that, but still, I was entertained from beginning to end. Unfortunately, Dolph Ziggler's lack of psychology once again comes into play and reminds me that yes, wrestling is fake. Where he's starting to climb up the ladder, then Barrett grabs him, rips him off the ladder right into a bullhammer. And then Dolph Ziggler oversells it like he's in a coma. But then, like 2 seconds later, Dolph Ziggler is getting up and he's just running at full speed, acting like he wasn't hit at all. That is why I'm not a fan of Dolph Ziggler. But still, it was a very entertaining match. Most of these kinds of ladder matches, when you have these kinds of performers, are going to be a lot of fun. The only one who's really not that great in the ring is R-Truth, who does have his moments, but he was really athletic in his prime. Unfortunately, he's really had to tone down his style, and because he's usually just squashed, you don't really see too much of the R-Truth of old in his matches, and I can't remember anything he did here. Whereas with everybody else, even the filler guys like Harper and Stardust, I can remember some of their spots. Next is Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins, which I did not know who was going to win this. I suspected Rollins would, but I ultimately was wrong. It would have been weird either way because I don't like when a star like Randy Orton returns just to lose. Yet at the same time, Rollins really can't afford any losses. He seems to be losing quite a bit on his own. This was a really good match. I knew it was going to be a really good match. You have two excellent in-ring performers clashing, and it was very fun and exciting stuff. As for the storyline, it was weird how much this was the main plot line going on in all the Raws and I think SmackDowns, well, maybe not the SmackDowns, but some of the SmackDowns, and that, Orton returns and it seems like the Authority have placated him and he's now aligned with Rollins, but he's also doing some things that sort of screw Rollins over, so there's some tensions there. Well, it turns out that it was all a facade. Randy Orton turns on Rollins, kicks the shit out of him, and I kept wondering why. I did not care for this angle at first because Orton could have tore apart Seth Rollins many earlier times, but he chose not to, so I didn't understand his motivations, like why he's prolonging this, when it seemed like one of the key components of Randy Orton's character is that he doesn't think things through. He is just incredibly violent and vicious and sort of like Dean Ambrose, except not quite as crazy, but at the same time, much more deadly. But then afterwards, they have this bit where, so Rollins and Orton, they set up their WrestleMania match, but they're supposed to wrestle that night on Raw. But then Rollins acts like a total douche and alienates his fellow Authority members, and so he comes out apparently alone, but then all the Authority members come out and support him, and it turns out to have been a ruse this entire time. Interesting, but not very intelligent, because it ultimately amounted to nothing. Randy Orton came out first. He was in the ring. What difference would it have made if Rollins came out with the Authority and there were no tensions? They would have had him anyway, so that just seemed convoluted and unnecessary. It would have made more sense if Rollins came out on his own, and then they had their match, and then, as they're fighting, the other Authority members come out and trap him, just because, then you could argue that, Randy Orton had been mentally preparing himself to deal with the other Authority members, but, during this match, they come out, and now he can't really adapt his plans, whereas he did actually adapt, as soon as he saw them out there, so that just seemed awkwardly written, but I will concede that the segments did keep me entertained. I liked watching everybody turn on Rollins, especially as the way they sold it I read it on Yahoo. Somebody had mentioned it better than I would, but it felt like something all their characters would do at that time. But then when Sting comes out, that was pretty awesome too. So, like I said, that storyline, it did start to entertain me, but it doesn't really hold up very well when you actually apply logic to it. One thing I noticed about this match, even though it's really good, I loved the RKO at the end. Randy Orton is great when it comes to carrying other people, but it always seems like there's something self-serving about it. I went back and I watched Roman Reigns' match with Randy Orton last year, and a lot of people think that that's Roman Reigns' best match. I disagreed, and I actually think that Reigns' best opponent is Seth Rollins, whenever they fight on Raw or SmackDown, because when Reigns fought Randy Orton, it seemed like the match was designed to make Randy Orton look good. He had the big spots that require Reigns to help him, but ultimately make Randy Orton look a lot stronger. He does that real fast reversal body slam. He did that to Reigns. I think superplexed him. That makes Randy Orton look really badass. Doesn't make Roman Reigns look that badass, even though Reigns won, but I thought the match was built around how awesome Randy Orton was. Whereas when you see Seth Rollins versus Reigns, it seems like Seth Rollins, win or lose, designs it to make Roman Reigns look a lot better, where it could show off his strength, while at the same time, Rollins comes out looking good too. And you could kind of see that here. Like, the big moments were all about how cool Randy Orton is, and I thought Rollins really didn't stand out on his own here. I thought it was just, once again, it made Randy Orton look much better. Plus, he gets the victory, so I disagreed with that primarily because Rollins is about to be our new champion. If he had defeated Orton, even if it wasn't a clean win, I'd be like, okay, this guy deserves to be in the big leagues. But he keeps losing to all the relevant people, whether it's Cena, Orton. I mean, he would have lost to Swagger and Ambrose at various points, and they're more mid-card guys if he didn't get help. So I just don't feel he's championship material. I know that that's supposed to be part of the point, that he gets all this heat because he has to resort to dirty tactics in order to win, but I don't know. Like when Ric Flair would do that during his prime, I always felt that Ric Flair was good enough to be there. He just lacked the character. Like, he'd always start showboating, or he'd start getting a little cowardly, but I always felt that he was strong enough to be there. Right now I don't feel that Seth Rollins is strong enough, and I think a victory over Randy Orton would have been enough to give him that credibility. But once again, older guy goes over the younger guy. Triple H versus Sting. So Sting comes out to this weird taiko drum entrance. I wasn't sure why they do that, because it didn't sound like they were playing his theme song. It just seemed like they were having this moment that would lead to his theme song. But, okay. And he came out dressed all like flamboyant too. That was strange to me. Then Triple H comes out as the frickin' Terminator. So I was looking on Twitter, as this was going on, and Spoonie was commenting, and he thought it was utter shit. He obviously hated it, and I saw a lot of other people thought it was really stupid too, because it is blatant product placement. However, I kind of loved it, if for the wrong reasons. I just thought it was so over the top and so corny that I was just laughing my ass off as this went down, and it reminded me of that Wrestling Is Not Wrestling comedy sketch that you could find on YouTube, and if you have not seen it and you like wrestling, you should. It's pretty funny. But they make this claim that Triple H's character is very insecure. He is not the badass that his rivals are. So he ultimately has to play dirty and has to use psychology in order to get over. But he thinks that he's like this great badass Conan the Barbarian type character, so he'll come out dressed up as Conan, like I think he did last WrestleMania, because that's the kind of person he wants to be, and now apparently he really wants to be Terminator. So I think that's actually very much in character for Triple H to do something like this, as ridiculous as the whole bit is. Because that does make sense. Triple H is kind of an underhanded. He's not as strong as The Rock or Stone Cold, so he usually has to cheat. And yet he thinks of himself as like the greatest competitor to ever live. So that didn't bother me as much as it obviously bothered some people, but it is very, very, very silly. And this was one of the most bizarre matches I have ever seen. Probably the most crazy one since, I started watching wrestling again. God, where do I even begin? For one, the match itself isn't that great. Sting looks good for his age. He moves well for his age. But he does a drop kick at one point and starts getting the "This is awesome" chants, or the "You still got it" chants. It is very difficult to do a drop kick. I've seen a lot younger guys screw it up. Even Alberto Del Rio, I think, botched it at one point. And it was a really good drop kick. The problem is that it's still just a drop kick. We've seen that done many, many times before, and that was sort of the highlight. And then I think at one point Sting gets up on the turnbuckle and jumps off. The match seemed more built around Sting. I can't remember anything Triple H did on his own except cheat to win. But even then, there's nothing all that amazing. It wasn't especially fast-paced. There were times where I was kind of like, oh, okay, can we move along here? And then it takes a turn to Crazy Town. Sting has Triple H in his submission finisher. I can't think of what it's called right now for some reason. That would be the Scorpion Death Drop, I think, is his knockout finish, but I can't think of what his submission hold is called. But then DX comes out, and New Age Outlaws and X-Pac, and just as they're about to make the save and take out Sting, you hear the NWO's music, and then Kevin Nash, Hall, and Hogan come out, and you're like, what the fuck? This makes no sense for two reasons. For one, they're all part of the Clique, except I think Hogan, I guess New Age Outlaws probably wouldn't be there either. And there was no sign that there was any kind of falling out between them. The last we saw the Clique together, they were all friendly. So why would Nash and Hall betray his buddy? But also, NWO and the Sting were bitter enemies. That was almost the decisive feud of that entire angle, was between Hogan and Sting. And it wasn't like they reconciled, at least during that storyline. It didn't lead to a face turn from Hogan or a heel turn from Sting. If this was the Wolfpack who came out, that would have been one thing, but the Wolfpack was never as iconic as the NWO, so obviously WWE isn't going to really want to do that. So they start fighting, and these old dudes, the NWO, start kicking the crap out of DX. Now, the DX guys, they might be too old to be active performers, but they still look decent. I could buy them just based on their appearances, being a credible threat in the match. Now, whether they could actually work a good match or not, still, I don't know. The Ascension versus the the New Age Outlaws was pretty fucking boring, so probably not. But Nash and Hall, they look pretty out of shape. They look like their time is done and they should not be out there. Hogan looks good, but you could tell he's just not very mobile anymore. So at first I'm just baffled that the NWO tears through DX. Well, then DX mounts a successful counterattack, so that made up for that enough. And what surprised me was Scott Hall took a really nasty bump. He started to go for his finisher, and then I don't remember if it was Billy Gunn, or I think it was Billy Gunn, but it could have been Road Dogg, flipped him over, and he lands on his back pretty hard. At one point, Nash goes down, and he starts grabbing his quad. So I don't know if that was an in-joke or if he really hurt himself. he shows up, I think, later on, so he must have been fine. But that was pretty funny. Then Hogan gets taken out by X-Pac. Think about that. Hogan, probably the biggest wrestling superstar of all time, the guy who practically was never defeated cleanly during his prime, gets taken out by X-Pac. Wow, the mighty have fallen, but you know what? I have to give credit to Hogan for taking that bump. Like, my mind's blown at this point. Like, what the fuck is going on? Then Shawn Michaels shows up, super kicks Sting, not enough to put him down. The fight continues, and Sting at one point Sting brings out his bat and Triple H brings out a sledgehammer, which I was thankful for because I really wanted to see that happen. And then I think Sting breaks Triple H's sledgehammer with his bat, and that was pretty awesome too. Unfortunately, this backfires because Triple H grabs the end of the sledgehammer and knocks Sting out with it and takes the victory. A lot of people didn't like this. To me, it was a lose-lose situation because if Sting won, outside of just having that WrestleMania moment, there's been talk that he's not planning on doing any more matches after this, that this was his grand finale, and it probably should be just because this wasn't a great match on its own. But so he really gains nothing outside of, once again, that WrestleMania moment. But Triple H is still a part-time wrestler. He shows up, sporadically every year, and he's been losing so much that I'm kind of worried him putting somebody over isn't going to mean anything anymore. I really did not like when Ric Flair buried Daniel Bryan by saying if this was Triple H during his prime, he would have tore Bryan apart. To me, that actually undermined Bryan's victory. I don't know if that was... I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but I like to think so anyway. But that bugged me. But now it's like, why should Triple H even bother getting into the ring anymore if they're just going to keep telling us that he's no longer the badass he used to be, if he was ever really a badass to begin with? I mean, I guess he technically would be, or at least he became a badass after a point. So, like, if Sting won, I would have been left unsatisfied. If Sting or the Triple H won, I'm still unsatisfied. I think they really should have had it so both sides are protected. There wasn't really a clear-cut winner, a double disqualification, whatever. And then to just cement the absurdity of this match, Triple H extends his hand and Sting accepts it. I'm thinking, what the fuck? Is Triple H turning face now? Has he been humbled by this experience? Did Sting turn heel? This was supposed to be a great moment, like between Hogan and The Rock, where they shake hands, but the crowd obviously didn't like it. And then Triple H and Stephanie come out afterwards and cut a very heelish promo. So Triple H is still very obviously the villain, and now Sting looks kind of like a sellout bitch for shaking his hand. Was WWE trying to bury Sting at this point? I don't know, but it was very bizarre. But here's the thing, with this match, it wasn't intended to be a technical classic. You were supposed to enjoy it for the spectacle, and only for the spectacle. You want to see NWO and DX clash. You want to see Sting versus Triple H clash. That's what I felt about it. And I will admit, while I was watching it, I was constantly marking out. It wasn't until the match was over and I started thinking about it that, I started noticing how utterly strange it was. And I think that the whole purpose of this was simply that it was a novelty. You weren't really supposed to consider it part of, the main storyline involving the Authority. In fact, the Authority don't even get involved here. This was sort of just a side story, for lack of a better word. And, as such, I was fine with it, but I could see why some people would really dislike it. Oh yeah, so I should talk about this bit where The Rock comes out to answer Triple H's heelish promo, and he steals the show because The Rock is incredibly charismatic. Well, then Stephanie tells him to get lost and then slaps him, and says, "Oh, what are you going to do, hit a woman?" So then The Rock, like, very reluctantly steps out of the ring, notices Ronda Rousey's there, brings her in, and that was actually pretty awesome. I thought Ronda Rousey really handled herself very well. She has a great presence. She's a good-looking woman, but there's a warrior's presence about her to where she looks at Stephanie like, yeah, she is capable of kicking everyone's asses. And then when she says that line, any ring I step in is my ring, that was an awesome way to deliver that. Perfect line, perfect delivery. I'm now really eager to see what's about to go down. And then, like, she grabs Stephanie's arm while The Rock and Triple H kind of clash, and then I don't remember how it kind of breaks up, but then she ends up throwing Triple H, and that was pretty cool. You don't see too much divas, or not. Well, you don't see any divas beat up the men, and even though Ronda Rousey isn't a diva, she's still a woman, so I'm a little surprised they, crossed genders there, but I really loved it. I thought that was still awesome. I wish there'd be more of that, because I do believe women can beat up men if they are tough enough. But then she grabs Stephanie again, and I'm waiting for her to do something. Hit her, clothesline her, whatever. She just is grabbing her arm, and Stephanie's like acting as if she's in major pain for it, and then she lets her go. So great build up, but a very weak payoff. They should have done something bigger with what Rousey does to Stephanie. But still, it was a very entertaining segment. I really would like to see Ronda Rousey become part of the WWE and become sort of like the female version of Brock Lesnar. That would be awesome. I don't think they have any plans for it, but if they could somehow work that out, that would be great. Then we have the Divas match, AJ Lee and Paige versus the Bella Twins. You obviously should know that I do not care for the Divas division. It relies on the same people over and over again. I'm tired of seeing the same match over and over again, and most of the competitors, they look good, but they can't wrestle worth shit. But it's obvious that WWE cares very little, as most of their storylines are very unengaging, and when they do get any screen time, it usually is a pretty fucking awful storyline. However, I actually watched this. There wasn't anything great about this feud, but I did watch it because the match quality did pick up. However, I do feel that the title should have been on the line here. Whoever gets the pin becomes the new Diva Champion. And what I was thinking they would do, because I didn't realize that the title wasn't on the line until I watched it. I don't know why I presumed that, but I figured Brie would turn on Nikki, get the pin, and it would turn out that she had been a face all this time, that she was just trying to be smart, and once she finally, saw Nikki in a vulnerable position, she struck and got her vengeance. That would have been pretty fucking cool, and would have gave relevancy to what ultimately was one of the worst storylines of 2014, the Bella vs. Bella storyline. Especially once they became friends. But otherwise, since the title wasn't on the line, there wasn't really any stakes. It just felt like it was padding. They had to have the Divas do something. Why couldn't they have put the title on the line? This is WrestleMania, for crying out loud. Instead, they delivered a very solid match that could have easily been seen on Raw. This was probably the weakest point because it served no purpose. There was no reason to really be engaged by it. Plus, if they had the title on the line, it would have justified the tensions between Paige and AJ Lee, which I thought were forced, as it was. But otherwise, yeah, I like AJ Lee, I like Paige, I think they're excellent performers. I think Nikki's really done a good job at carrying herself as champion. Just the way she acts, there's a smugness about her, a bitchiness that's very vicious. It's not like, most, like Summer Rae, for example, when she's a heel, yeah, she's smug and she's bitchy, but she's not really all that tough, or she doesn't have that aura of badassery, but Nikki, the way she carries herself, I could buy her as a tough chick, even though she's not as good as the other two in terms of her promo skills or her wrestling abilities, but she's better than I think detractors give her credit for, whereas Brie's still pretty mediocre all around. But yeah, so they could have easily shown that on Raw, but it wasn't a terrible match. John Cena versus Rusev. Okay, so for those who forgot, I thought that this was a horribly booked matchup leading into Fastlane because Rusev had just lost to Ryback, and he got his ass kicked at the Rumble, while John Cena had just failed to get the World Heavyweight Championship. So, but I still felt that John Cena was being demoted to fight Rusev, when it should have felt like Rusev was really stepping up. That he had conquered everybody else in his path. He should have gone over Ryback. He should have at least put up a really good fight against Roman Reigns at the Rumble before being eliminated. But nope. Apparently because he lost these two feuds, now he is worth Cena's time. And a lot of people liked their Fastlane match. I didn't. Maybe just because I hated the booking so much. Well, I will concede that the writing got better. I liked seeing John Cena kind of adopt a vicious edge, and I thought Rusev acted more like a traditional. Well, I didn't like the fact that Rusev acted like the traditional heel, but at least he showed a much more of a mean streak. Since Lana wasn't there to rein him in. In fact, this feud, if anything, has made Lana a little bit more sympathetic. He'll hold the submission until he gets bored. Or I actually did kind of like the segment where he did it on the announcer's table, even though I'm trying to figure out how that would make the Accolade hurt more, but still it was a pretty brutal segment, and I like the fact that he was blatantly overpowering John Cena. Unfortunately, this made it obvious that John Cena would win. And I think it would have been so much better for Rusev's career to defeat Cena and then to rub salt on the wound, burn the United States Championship. So then he'll be remembered as the guy who never even lost the mid-card belt. He just deemed himself above it, and then would make an effort to move on to the title scene, or at least move on to somebody like Roman Reigns, or I don't know who else would be more relevant between Cena and whoever holds the championship, but you're obviously not going to turn Rusev face to face Rollins. But now that Cena's won, I really worry that Rusev's going to lose a lot more, and he's not going to be as important because they hadn't fully fleshed out his character. I don't feel like I've seen everything Rusev is capable of, so the streak in a lot of ways was the only thing securing his relevant position. Now that he's lost that, he can easily become a jobber. And then once he runs out of steam, he might become, the comedic character. Like all these guys, Rikishi, Brodus Clay, Great Khali, they don't get over as genuine threats, so they become, funny, and that's how they entertain audiences. I don't want to see that out of Rusev. The man has such a good grasp on wrestling psychology that he deserves so much more than just being fed to John Cena. And also, they needed somebody newer to get that rub. I would have much rather even like Dolph Ziggler. Somebody who could benefit from a victory over Rusev. Cena doesn't need this. He has so many other victories under his belt, and them trying to sell this as his most important fight yet was total horseshit. The storyline, it got better, but it still wasn't to the point to where it was good, and I still could care less about this matchup, especially as I knew Rusev was going to be fed to Cena. However, the match itself was pretty good. It wasn't as good as Orton vs. Rollins. It wasn't as good as the Tag Team Championship. It wasn't as good as the Intercontinental Championship. But it was better than AJ and Paige vs. the Bellas. And, it was technically better than Triple H vs. Sting, but we're going to remember Triple H for Sting for obvious reasons a lot more than I think we'll remember this one. It was cool seeing Cena and Rusev do some new stuff. But as a whole, I mean, I thought it was better than their Fastlane match, but I didn't think it was great. I still would have rather this not happen now, or at least if they would have had a much more compelling storyline. If once again, if I felt Rusev was stepping up to face Cena instead of Cena stepping down to face Rusev, I don't know where this is going to go, because now Cena's the United States champion. Major consolation prize. Man, I feel like this was even a bigger step down for Cena than it was for Bryan winning his belt. It'll be interesting. They're giving these bigger stars these mid-card belts. Will that bring down the star power of these stars, or will that elevate the belts? We'll just have to see where they go with it. Whoever obviously wins back from Bryan and Cena, that can be a major star-making moment. It just depends who they ultimately use. With our luck, it'll be the Big Show or Kane, or somebody else who really doesn't need it right now. But we'll just have to see where they go. The Undertaker. Oh yeah, by the way, I knew AJ Lee and Paige would defeat the Bellas just because there were no stakes on the line, or there were no stakes in this match. If the belt was on the line, I'd say Nikki and Brie would have a chance, but I figured AJ Lee and Paige would win. But moving on, The Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt. I was sure Bray Wyatt would win. I figure The Undertaker is, on his last legs. He's not going to be in many more of these WrestleManias as a competitor, if any. And, they were trying to sell Bray Wyatt as the new face of fear, the one who will replace The Undertaker. So it wasn't just that, he wanted to beat up The Undertaker. And since Bray Wyatt's a lot younger and obviously has a big future in the WWE, it just seemed natural that he would go over The Undertaker and become the new face of fear. That didn't happen. And it's weird because this had a very unusual build-up. The Undertaker never showed up himself on Raw, unlike last year where he appeared a few times. Bray Wyatt carried this feud entirely on his own. He'd cut these promos. There were some pretty cool sketches where he'd come out and you'd think it's the Undertaker coming out in the coffin, but Bray Wyatt does instead. I thought the bit where the lightning bolt hits the chair, pretty awesome. I would almost have rathered The Undertaker showed up, but it was still a very unconventional and creative way at developing this storyline. And as a reward for pretty much carrying it on his own, Bray Wyatt loses. And now I think his singles career is finished. He will never be a credible main eventer because the last two major feuds he's had, which was against The Undertaker and John Cena, he lost. He failed in his goal. Now you could argue, but he defeated Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose between those. Well, defeating Chris Jericho means nothing because Chris Jericho only shows up to put people over these days. And Ambrose, he was just off a loss from Rollins and pretty much has been demoted to mid-card, so defeating Ambrose doesn't mean a whole lot either. Bray Wyatt only got these wins so they could build him up to this more relevant storyline, sort of like how he got the win over Bryan in order to build himself up for Cena. And actually, it was not just Bryan, it was The Shield, and that was a much more relevant win. But then, he loses the ones that counts. The matches that should put him on the main event scene ultimately amount to nothing because he's the loser. Undertaker did not need this win. Bray Wyatt did. If anybody else was in Bray Wyatt's role, I'd say go ahead and let The Undertaker win in order to validate Brock Lesnar's victory, so you're not just having Undertaker become talent enhancement. So, let's say instead of Bray Wyatt, they had, I don't know, who's a prominent heel right now? Well, not Stardust. He's not very prominent. Fuck, there isn't anybody right now. I don't know. Big Show, Kane, Bad News Barrett, any other heel who just, once again, they just want to kick the crap out of Brock Lesnar, nothing more, or they might have an independent storyline. If The Undertaker, oh God, did I screw that up? But if they just want to kick the crap out of The Undertaker, and Undertaker won, I'd be almost okay with that. But because Bray Wyatt is supposed to be the new face of fear, the new horror-themed villain, he should have won. And once again, now that he's lost these two major feuds, I just don't think they could rebuild him. The only way I think Bray Wyatt can maintain any sense of relevancy is if he corrupts somebody else in order to develop a new Wyatt family, and that becomes his gimmick. That he finds stronger, better wrestlers to surround himself, and he becomes that kind of villain, sort of like Seth Rollins, albeit more menacing. Um, but on his own, like this was the nail in the coffin for him, unfortunately. Uh, the match itself, it was all right. It was better than I thought it would be, considering how bad I thought the Lesnar Undertaker match was. Because Bray Wyatt's obviously not going to concuss The Undertaker immediately. The Undertaker was able to show off a lot more cool stuff that I'm surprised he could pull off at his age, like that bit where he walks the tightrope. The Undertaker looks pretty good. He's not as mobile as he used to be, but he's still fairly mobile. I could still buy him as a dangerous competitor. Bray Wyatt apparently went into this kind of injured. I'd heard that he sprained his ankle. But you couldn't really tell based on this match. It was a solid matchup that had a few pretty cool moments. I was shocked when Undertaker chokeslams and tombstones Bray Wyatt, and he gets up, or he kicks out, and then recovers enough to make a counterattack. I guess that's Bray Wyatt's primary strength, is he's durable, but still wasn't enough to finish the job here because he gets taken out by a second tombstone. I liked the moment where he does a spider walk, and then Undertaker counters by sitting up in his usual fashion. That did make me mark out. It was a match worth the novelty of it, because once again, it's Bray Wyatt, the new face of fear, versus Undertaker, the old face of fear, or I should say the current face of fear. And that was pretty cool. But that still wasn't a great match. Bray Wyatt's usually somebody who needs to be carried, and Undertaker, unfortunately, at this age also needs to be carried. But it was better than I think anybody thought it would be. Oh shit, we're almost an hour long. I apologize for the running time. This is a very, very long video. I think it would have been better if after The Undertaker won, the lights go out, then turn back on, and he's gone. That would have been pretty badass. Then you'd have like Bray Wyatt, like, what the fuck just happened? It would have also fit into this, this storyline that The Undertaker only shows up to wrestle and then vanishes. You don't have him walk out normally. I thought his entrance was very subpar. He just comes out very normally. It would have been cooler once again if the lights go out. Well, actually, I take that back. They couldn't do that because the event took place on the outside. It was an open air venue, which I thought totally ruined the atmosphere of this matchup. Bray Wyatt comes out with his lantern, even though it's in the daytime, and they can't obviously turn off the lights, so it's a very weird effect. And then he's interacting with these scarecrow people. Would have been very creepy, but because it's in the daylight, it's not dark, it just totally loses all of its atmosphere. That was a major mistake, I think, for this event, at least only for this match. So that was kind of strange, but moving on. What happened to my headset? Why did the audio take such a nosedive? Well, I'll tell you. I finished recording this vlog, went back to check out or to watch parts of it to make sure that everything recorded fine, and I was going to edit out the beginning and ending parts where I'm kind of breathing awkwardly, looking into the camera like an idiot before I start talking. And then I noticed that the audio died during the time when I was discussing the Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns storyline. And I was like, what the fuck happened? And then I tested out my headset microphone, and it was totally dead. It picked up nothing. It didn't acknowledge that there was any sound going in. And I realized that the time had come. RIP this headset. So get a good look at it. You're probably never going to see it again.
I figured it was going to happen sooner or later. The actual, like, I can't really listen back on it. Haven't been able to for the past 6 months or so. Um, but unfortunately, it is completely dead now, and I'll have to buy a new one. God damn it! This is going to push back critiquing the critics even farther. Um, oh god, I'm gonna have to probably reshoot all that footage unless I buy the exact same mic. God damn it. Anyway, I'll just go as fast as I can and describe what I felt about the storyline and this match and the finish. And the build up to this was awful. Uh, so Roman Reigns beats Daniel Bryan in a really good match. And then afterwards, that's when they get snowed in, and Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns have a confrontation, and it's a pretty cool moment. Lesnar saying he doesn't respect Roman Reigns, and then Roman Reigns saying, "But you will." I think it would have been more awesome if there was a crowd to witness this, but yeah, I can't blame WWE for that. What I can blame them for is how afterwards, despite everybody trying their absolute hardest to put Roman Reigns over, from Paul Heyman to Daniel Bryan, saying how badass and awesome he is, it seems like Reigns went on a losing streak. At one point, he was pinned cleanly by the Big Show of all people. The guy who got his ass handed to him by Brock Lesnar during last year's Royal Rumble. Um, and then he'd lose these just various matches, sometimes in teams, sometimes as a singles competitor. Uh, do they realize how booking works? The idea is you get a champion, or particularly a heel champion whom you want to see get their ass kicked. You build up a baby face, make them a credible threat to said champion, and then people will pay money to see said babyface kick the shit out of said champion. Um, they don't even have to win. It's just that's what draws people to watch the match in the first place. So you take Brock Lesnar, the guy who defeated The Undertaker and ended the streak, the guy who crushed John Cena, the guy who overcame the odds and beat John Cena, the top guy for the past 10 years, and Seth Rollins, the top villain. Um, even though they worked together, even though he had a broken rib. This is the most badass guy that WWF has arguably ever produced. Um, and the credible fighter is this guy who keeps losing his matches. What the fuck? That's dumb. And yet, it was believed for the longest time that yes, Roman Reigns was going to go over. But then they never interact. At one point, they do bring Brock Lesnar on Raw, but then Roman Reigns doesn't come out. And then they finally have their big confrontation right before WrestleMania, and they play a game of tug of war. Seriously. So that was fucking terrible. That was one of the worst build-ups to a WrestleMania I've ever seen, and yet the match, fucking amazing. I thought this stole the show by a long shot, and I was sure it was going to be a disaster because um, both Reigns and Lesnar usually need somebody who can carry a match, somebody more versatile than they are. Uh, but they didn't in this case. Pretty much, it just starts off where they're stiffing each other as hard as they can. Um, Reigns actually makes Lesnar bleed and start to swell up a bit. But then Lesnar typically just overpowers Reigns, just kicks the shit out of him, suplex city bitch. Roman Reigns tries to mount an offense. Occasionally he gets lucky and gets some shots in, but Lesnar just no sells it. It's just like the issue with Cena, where Lesnar is just beating up Roman Reigns to just really badly. The difference between Cena and Reigns, though, and I liked this, is Cena sold it like he was like, "Oh my God, what is happening?" He was crushed by it, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. Whereas Roman Reigns is like, "Bring it." Come on, is that all you got? Even though I was like, he's being destroyed by Brock Lesnar. Um, so I just like that difference. But then, things. Well, first, like there was one cool part where Roman Reigns like delivers a real stiff clothesline, and he doesn't even knock Lesnar down. He doesn't even knock him back. Like Lesnar, like, is that all you got? That just made me squee. Um, But then they get out the outside. Roman Reigns pushes Lesnar into the steel part of the turnbuckle. And I'm not sure if Lesnar bladed himself or if he just hit really, really hard. I presume he bladed himself, but WWE is claiming otherwise. And I can't really see when he'd actually be able to cut himself. But he starts like blood drenches down his face. Now he's showing signs of vulnerability. Reigns gets him in the ring, and now Reigns' super punches are knocking him down. I think he gets a spear in there too. Can't get the pin, but now it's like there's hope for Roman Reigns to win. But then, Lesnar starts recovering. He starts giving a counterattack. And now it's a very competitive match. It's going back and forth. And I really liked this because it's not just a total, they don't just recycle the SummerSlam match with Cena. Now we're getting a much different kind of matchup, even though, once again, you feel that Lesnar is really the baddest ass of them all. And Reigns kind of got lucky, but it's still making Reigns look good in the process. But then you hear Seth Rollins' theme song, and he comes out. And once again, I'm looking on Twitter because I find Spoonie's tweets to be very hilarious. And he complains about, why does he wait until the match? Why doesn't he wait until the match is over? And I'm thinking, because poor Roman Reigns is about to get squashed. There's no way he's taking out Lesnar, even though I feel like it would benefit Rollins a lot more if he was the one to pin Lesnar. But so he comes in and he curb stomps Lesnar, but he can't pin him. Lesnar kicks out. And I also think he threw out Roman Reigns. Then Lesnar grabs Rollins and is ready to F5 him. Reigns spears him, and it's a real cool looking visual. But then Rollins recovers, curb stomps Reigns, and gets the pin and becomes the new champion. Once again, I really think it would have been better if he defeated Randy Orton earlier that night. But it was the right way to end things because, for the most part, all the Raws and SmackDowns leading into WrestleMania were built around Rollins. He got the most publicity, being with doing that segment with Jon Stewart. His Randy Orton storylines seemed to be what ended most of the shows, whereas Lesnar and Reigns just didn't feel quite as important, even though they were the ones headlining. So I suspected that, even though I've heard that Rollins, it was like a last-minute decision. So I was right. I did guess this correctly. You can check out my Facebook if you don't believe me. But I may have been right for the wrong reasons. But if Lesnar had won, I think that would have hurt the WWE because he just doesn't wrestle enough. We need a fighting champion right now. And then if Reigns had won, the fans would have just turned on him. You don't know how many subscriptions would have been canceled. It would have made Reigns look bad in the long run. Even though it might be a short burst of legitimacy. But Rollins, people will boo him, but they're supposed to boo him. The Smarks are thrilled. And it just felt like the right way to end this. It set new records. This was the first WrestleMania cash-in. It was just an all-around good idea. Phenomenal match. I was thrilled. Easily Reigns' best work. And I've really liked Reigns' work with Rollins. And, the match with Orton was good too. And I even did one good one with Rusev, the last one I think they had together. But this, by far, will stay in my mind. It was an excellent way to end the show. And in general, I thought this was a really good show. It would have been a great show if the endings, once again, were designed to make new stars. If Mizdow had won the Battle Royale, if Rollins had beaten Orton, if Bray had beaten Taker, then I think I would have called this a great WrestleMania. Instead, I just have to say it's a really good one because the match quality was strong. Once again, the matchups were unusual. Going into WrestleMania, most of the storylines were shit, but the event in itself cut off the goldfish poop that is the SmackDowns and Raws leading up into it. This was a pretty awesome event, so I'd recommend you watch it. In terms of written reviews, I've gotten up to Puppet Master 7, I believe, Retro Puppet Master. I just got that up yesterday. I'm not sure if I'm going to release this video Wednesday or Thursday, so by then you might see my review of the 8th one, Puppet Master The Legacy, which I hear is delightful. So read all those, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I apologize for the length of this video. Hopefully the audio quality is clear enough so you can understand what I'm saying, but I shall see you guys later.